Today we're going to be doing the Murder in Egypt. First I want to show this. Hopefully everybody can see that. That is in compliments to Heather Baxter. She created this for the cover of our book. She also created a fabric color swatch sheet, and I wanted to give her credit for that. I am doing the 2020 Murder Mystery quilt, and it's called Murder of the Sphinx. Now, let me give you a little bit of background. I've picked out all my fabrics, which you saw in that short little video. I have the ones that we're going to be using today, and it is 7 different colors. I'm going to show them to you. It's these 3 here. Now, on the directions, it says that you can actually see how other people made their block. Then you can choose your colors if you really are undecided or you don't know. And another thing is, because this is your quilt and whatever color you want to make it, you can mix and match. So although I had those 3 blues, if you wanted to use a purple with those blues, that would be fine. Any color, it doesn't make any difference. Finished quilt measurements are 72 by 60. Now you can make it bigger by adding more borders, larger borders. If you do make it this size, you're going to need about 3 yards of 45-inch fabric for the back of it. The batting can be in a package, 75 by 65. Thread is whatever color you want, and the binding is a ½ yard of the fabric. That's for the finished quilt. If you go by this size, now if you make it bigger, you're going to have to add a little bit more fabric. So first let me show you. This is the directions right here. This is what we're making. So it's going to be pretty easy. So let me go ahead and get it cut. I'll show you how I'm cutting. The very first thing that you want to do is square up your fabric. And mainly that is cutting off the edge. You do not want to use any selvage. And the very first piece says that we're going to cut a 6.5 by 6.5. So I am going 6.5 in. And you want to make sure that your ruler is bigger than your size. For example, this is a 8-inch ruler. You can see it right here. So we turn it upside down because we're looking for 6.5 over here. This is the distance, 6.5 inches. And as you know, if you have followed me on my videos, I'm going to show you. Let me see if I got it close enough to show you here. If you'll look at this little black line right there, I make sure that's on my fabric when I get ready to cut, because I want to make sure that this is 6.5. I don't want less. And I always put a weight on my ruler here. And then what I'll do is I will slide it up and down to make sure that it stays on there. If not, I'll move it on a little bit. And then slide it back down. And yes, it stayed on there. Let me back up a little bit. I'll cut it from one end to the other. Make sure the ruler that you're using goes off. Up here, it goes off the fabric, and on the other end, it extends beyond the fabric here. You don't want it on the edge of the fabric. That's how you end up cutting your rulers by accident with your rotary cutter. And now this here is 6.5. So now we have to go the other way. So let me move this fabric so I can show you. And we're going to want to get this end squared. So the way that you square it is you're going to take this little ruler here, and you're going to, and I do the same thing. I make sure that the black line is right above on the fabric. It's off both ends of the fabric, and then I cut here, which makes this end straight. I'm going to have difficulty with my thumb. I've got it all bandaged up. I have 2 bandages, as a matter of fact, because my thumb cracked due to the cold weather. And now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come down 6.5. I'm going to make sure that I'm on the line, and it's going to be on the line both ways. So not only is it on the line, or the line is on the fabric here, it's also on the fabric there. And then for you people that are left-handed, you can just go ahead and cut this right off. And I can do it both ways, so. And make sure that your hand stays on your ruler for stability so that it does not slip. And then just cut it off like that. And there it is. So I've got one piece cut at 6.5 by 6.5. Then I fold up this fabric for the next time. And I always make sure I do one at a time, and then I will mark it. The reason I mark it is because all of these different fabrics will get confused eventually if you don't have them marked and kept them straight. And I have a little tub that I keep everything in. Whether I use this again or not. If I don't, I can either cut it down to strips or just set it aside. Now the next color I'm doing is C1, which is the lightest of the 3 C's. And it wants it to be 3.5 by 12.5. So I already know that I can get a 12.5 inch piece out of here. So I only want to go 3.5, which leaves me more fat quarter left over. I wouldn't want to take this and pull it aside and do 2.5. Because at this point, I don't know how much of this I'm going to need. So I want to make sure I have a lot left. So first I get my 3.5 mark because I've already cut it. And took my end off. So I go up and down here, make sure I've got 3.5 inches. Excuse me, it's not 3.5, I'm looking at the wrong one. So double check your directions. It's actually a 7.5 by 7.5, so it's bigger than the last piece. So back to this ruler. Here's my 7.5 mark, because remember this is a 8.5 inch ruler. So 7.5. I always try to check my directions twice. Go down here. Yep, it's 7.5. 7.5 down here. I've got it off both ends. I put my weight on. And then cut it. Move this out of the way. Turn this sideways. And I am using water. I am not using starch. If you're planning on using starch, you want to be using it as you iron your pieces right now. Or you could have all of yours starched ahead of time and put them on a rack if you'd like. And now this is 7.5 by 7.5, so it's going to be squared. And I could have used this black. If I use this black here, it's got the markings for it. Okay, here's 7.5. I want to go down and get it on my mark because I want to make sure it's squared up. And the importance of using the same rulers are the company that made them will make them all the same. If you're using 2 different ones, you're getting 2 different sizes actually. And you can even do that comparison for yourself. I set that one aside. Now we'll get C2 out, which is this one here. And then I'm going to iron it before I get started. Now I'm working on the next one, which is C2. And it says 6.5 by 12.5. So I'm going to go over 6.5. If you're ever in doubt, you can always measure to find out if this is 12.5 and you don't know. Just measure it from top to bottom. Then you'll find out which way to put your fabric, because I always go for the smallest from the outside to the end and try to get the largest on the strip. If it doesn't work, I can either turn my fabric, because I know that it's longer on this end than it is on this end, or else I get another fabric. Now in this case, just as a matter of fact, I think I did it on my last quilt that I just finished. If for some reason you need to piece it, because this is to me, it almost is scrappy, you can always piece 2 pieces of fabric together. I mean, I wouldn't put them at the corner of my fabric, but you can put them somewhere and nobody would ever know that they weren't supposed to be pieced. I've done it on a couple of quilts and it blended right in. As a matter of fact, it even looked pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going for my 6.5. So here's my 1. I'm going down to 6.5. And I'm putting it on the line. And then butting up my larger ruler, which extends on the top and the bottom of the fabric. Put the weight on it here, and I'm going to go up the fabric and down the fabric, and it is correct. And then I'm going to cut it, and I'm just going to continue doing this until I have all my fabrics cut out. So you go ahead and do that, and then we're going to put it all over here by the sewing machine, and then we're going to put it together. Now on this piece, it is an actual yardage of fabric. So what I do is it's folded in half. Let me show you here so you can see. So there, it's folded in half. And what I do is I take the bottom right here, and I'm laying it on my table, and then what I'm doing is I am matching up the bottom down here before I cut the side off to make it straight. In this case, I'm going to go, and I don't want to try to do a line where all these little numbers are, so I go to the next one down so that I can see these little dash lines, because I'm going to put them on top of the fold, just like it was the straight edge had been cut already. Then I'm going to cut off this side here. So I have enough here off of it, and I have enough over there up on that end, and that's where I'm going to cut this off. I've already ironed it, so it's just a matter of cutting it off to get a straight edge on it. And this is my H3. And it's asking for 2 different pieces of fabric being cut out of this, 2 different sizes. So one of them is 6.5 and one is 7.5. So to avoid wasting fabric, I'm going to cut this distance 7.5. Because if I cut this 6.5, I'd have to cut another piece 7.5, and I have 2 pieces. Remember, I flipped it up and showed you? So it's all about making the best use out of your fabric that you can get. So I double check. One is 7.5 by 7.5. One is 6.5 by 6.5. So I go to the 7.5. Put it on the line. And it looks like it is still squared up here pretty good. But we'll fix that when we cut it. Let's make sure all the way up to the top is 7.5. Because we do not want to shortchange ourselves at all. It's always better to cut a little piece off. But if you cut it too short, you cannot add a little piece. When I say little piece, I'm talking 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch. So I cut it like that. And now I have my piece, and I turn it. And I'm not turning it, here's the fold here. I'm turning it so I'm going to cut off the other end. This is the selvage end. This has little, in my case now, my fabric has little holes. And I'm going to show you here. See if I can get it on 2 different. You should be able to see the hole right there. See the little holes? You don't want to use that in your seam. So what you do is you're going to have to cut those off. So that's why I have them on this end. And then I'm going to square it up. Make sure that your fabric is on top of each other. And all you're doing is coming on the left-hand side of the row of holes to square this up. Just like this. You take it off, and I got it, as you can see. Let me flip it over here. See the holes there? And the holes, whoops, holes here. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the 7.5, and what I'll do is, since I don't want 2 of them, I'm going to open up my fabric. And it doesn't make any difference whether you cut with the wrong side up or the right side up. That's not going to affect the dimensions or anything. So I go to 7.5 and make sure that I line it up at the bottom, because I want to square it. Okay, so there's my 7.5. And I only need 1 piece, so there's that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut, let me bring it down here a little bit. This is where the 6.5 comes in, because you know the next piece is 6.5 by 6.5. So I'll go down here and I'm going to line it up. I'm using these dashed lines. As long as they're on my fabric, it's okay. Okay, there's my 6.5. Oops. I didn't press down hard enough there. Okay, now we're going to turn this one. I pulled on the other end, but I'm cutting the exact same way. You don't want to change the way you cut something midstream. You want to continue cutting it the same way. So if you start out and you're going along and you're putting a ruler up here because you're right-handed, that's fine. Or you can take the fabric, you can take the ruler and put it on the other end. But I started this way, so I'm just going to continue this way. Let's make sure that, yeah, I got it. Okay. So the other, and then I'm going to keep these scraps because I am giving my sister the scraps. So that's my 6.5 by 6.5 and my 7.5 by 7.5. And then I just set that aside, and now I have 1 more to cut, and it is 6.5 by 12.5. This piece of fabric, you can see the selvage because they have it on both. They have the holes on this side and on that side. So the first thing I do is take it off of this side, and then I can tell I got all of it on this side here. But this normally tells you where the fabric's from. It says, "Here comes fun. So Caroline." I think this fabric is fairly new. My other fabric that I just had, the last fabric, I believe I bought back in 2008. I mix and match all the different ages. It feels just as good as this fabric right here. They both feel good. Now I need a 6.5 by 12.5, so I need my other ruler. This is also a Creative Grids, and this actually has little increments. You can read that. That says 12.5 right there. That's what I put it on. And then we'll cut that one off at 12.5. There we go. And that's it. And now we have all our fabrics cut. Put them up here. And I'll take it over here to the sewing machine and we will get this together. This ought to go together pretty fast. They're having us take C1 and H3, which are both 7.5 by 7.5. We're going to sew them diagonally, and then we're going to make half square triangles out of them by cutting them diagonally. That sounded like I repeated myself, didn't it? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and mark my diagonal line. For all those that are just beginning, I'm going to show you how to do that. I know that some of you do not like to use friction pins. I don't know if that's going to help me out with the light or not here. No, not really. It needs to go that way. But anyway, I don't have a problem with it. This is going to be on the back side of the fabric, so you're never going to see it even if it came back. I'm using my H3, which is the 3rd darkest blue color, which is, I believe, the Celestial. But anyway, the way that I do it, and you can use a pencil if you want to, keep in mind that wherever your ruler is, when you go diagonally with whatever utensil you're using, go ahead and put it up at the tip to find out how it reacts, because maybe it's going to be too far to the right and you need to move your ruler over to the left. Now in my case, I am going to put this line as a solid line. No, excuse me. I'm going to put this as dashes because this is where we cut it when we're done. I will make the solid line for the sewing. And I always do it. Oh, let me explain first. The reason that I use the creative grids along with liking them is that on this ruler, as you can see, this 1/4 inch is in the frosted. The 1 inch on this side is in the frosted. They also have a 1/4 inch at this end and a 1 inch at that. So that's really helpful. So what I do is I take this dashed line here and I put it down and I put it on the right hand side, excuse me, the left hand side of the line. So it's going to actually be on the left hand side of your diagonal mark. And the reason for that is that my writing utensil takes up a little bit of space. And I know that y'all don't think about that. A lot of the new people won't think about it. And you want it not to take up space. So to make up for it, that's why I go on the left hand side. Otherwise my block would actually be smaller. Then I'll draw a straight line. I do not have my revolving mat down here. I've actually got it up there. Otherwise I would have that. I can get it for the next time. And let me go ahead and mark this side here. And if you are one of the ones that don't want to mark down the middle, the diagonal part that you cut, that's fine. Just make sure that when you mark, instead of putting your ruler on the diagonal and marking, which actually steals a little bit of fabric from you based on your pencil, pen, whatever you're using, just go to the left a little bit. I have my line to look at for all those that are new. I want to do it this way until you get used to it, and then you can switch it to another way. You only have to do one piece of your fabric. That's the way it's going to look. Now, for those that really don't know a lot about fabric, I'm going to show you, because I can see it on both of these now. My grain line on this fabric is going up and down. My grain line here, which I can see, and it doesn't make any difference on this fat quarter because it's the right or the left side doesn't make a difference, but my grain line is going this way. So I want both my grain lines to go the same exact direction. So remember, it's going up and down this way. This is going up and down this way. So I'm going to put them on top of each other like this. I don't want to crisscross my grain lines. Let me make sure I'm all in here. And you want to make it as close to being on top of each other as you can. And this is where you're going to be going, oh my gosh, I cut it way off. Well, don't worry about it now because you've already done it. Just get one side lined up. Now, I pin. I'm going to flip it on the other side because this is the part that's got the printing on it. And I'm going to put one on this end here. And one on this end here. And then I'm going to sew it. I am using now, for this project, I'm going to be changing my colors. Normally I would either keep a white or a cream. But I'm going to do a blue for my thread on the top. And I'm using a cream on the bottom. My sewing machine is set at 2.5 inch for the length. Now because I'm not going to be sewing straight down this middle, I don't have to worry about putting a leader ender on. A leader ender, in my case, is a 2.5 inch square. Normally, lots of sewing machines, I have this set up for a zigzag because I'm going to be doing some free motion here later. So they have a little circle. If yours has a little circle, you're fine. But if it has a zigzag stitch, and that's what you have it set up, and you were to go straight down here, the fabric wants to feed into that as it goes and being pulled by the feed dog, which are these little things right here that are rough to your hands. But since we're going on the side, it doesn't make a difference. It won't grab it. Normally it won't grab it. Let's put it that way. If for some reason yours grabs it and you want to go ahead and put a leader ender, that's fine also. You can do that. Let me put my... Okay, and then we're just going to sew straight down this line. And if you're following along, this is exactly what the picture's showing you. pull right off the edge. There's no locking your fabric. You're going to turn it around, and you're going to have it head the other direction. Always make sure that you pull your flywheel towards you, not away from you, whenever you put it in your fabric. Cut it, take out your pins if you used any, and then I'm going to show you how to cut this with the ruler. Now the rule of thumb is that your ruler needs to be bigger than your fabric. And all you're trying to do is go down the middle, because you're wanting to cut this into 2 different pieces. And that's what you're going to have. You're going to open it up just like this. And you're going to have 2 pieces now. And it is saying to press them open, but it's not saying to the right or the left. We're going to use one of these today, and then we're going to set one aside. So it's your preference to which way you want to iron it, right or left. And I'm going to take you over here to the ironing board to show you how to press your seams before we open it up and press it. Flip the meat on a different side so you can see it. Pressing your seams is nothing more than going over the seam that you just sewed before anything else. Now, I like to think that this relaxes them because it's making it warm. So it should be easier for you to open it up. And what you need to think is, normally you would press to the dark side. Well, this fabric's darker than this fabric. And in order to do that, you put the light fabric down. The one that you want it to press towards goes on the top. This will automatically, when it goes like this, it will press it towards this side. And that's the way you want to do it. Now you have to keep in mind that right here in the middle is the bias. So we don't want to stretch the bias because it will disfigure your block. So whenever I do it, I go over it real slow. It's barely going on the fabric, and then I let go of the iron to release it after it's down there. And then you can tell it's all smooth and up against it by running your finger across that. And it has not stretched it out. You don't want it to stretch out. And this is the part that's going to stretch since it's on the bias. And then we'll do our next piece. And I'm going to do it the same way. You can always come back and re-iron it. So I go over it real slow. And then I let my iron down on it. And in this case, since I'm using this wool mat, I don't really need to do a lot of pressing because the heat generates back up on itself. So it's sort of like ironing it twice. I'm not using any water or starch. If you starched yours to begin with, you can starch again if you want. Now, I do not have any water in this iron. When I first bought this iron, before I moved here, and I have been here 18 and a half years, and I bought this iron back in Missouri, where I came from, and I actually used water in it. Well, it lasted probably, about 5 years with the water. Then it started having spitting issues. So I took the water out, let it dry out, and now I have no issues with it. So I don't really think there's an iron that is built yet where you should keep your water in the iron. It's okay to have one that has a reservoir. Let's go back to the sewing machine. We're going to take both these triangles and we're going to take them and make them 6.5 each. And I've got my ruler. So on my ruler, let's see if I can get up here to show you here. Okay, here's the 6, here's a 1/4. That makes this the 1/2. When I go down with my finger, I have this little bitty thing right here where it goes like that at this 2.5 mark. This represents my 6.5 inch corner, which is what I look at in my half square triangles. So I put it down here. The first thing I'm trying to do, when you put it on, I actually stick it on the block first to find out how big your block is. That helps you out a lot. You're trying to put this line down the diagonal sewing seam. And what I'm looking at is my block is 7 1/8? Yes, 7 1/8 inch. So I've got a lot of room to get down to 6 1/2. So the first thing I do is I slowly go down on my ruler, my cutting mat, because this is what I like to use. Because it rotates like this. And then I don't have to pick up my fabric. Alrighty, let me make sure I'm in here. So back to the beginning. I take my ruler, I put it diagonally so that the line is going right on the fabric, and I'm going to take off a minimum amount. I'm taking off the right hand side. I turn it. And let me move the... And then I take off the right hand side. And now what I do is I want to even this up. Get you a little closer here so you can see what I'm doing. But I want the whole thing in there. Okay. So I take my ruler and actually I'm going to have to flip my ruler because I need that 6 1/2. Okay. So here, remember now my 6 1/2 is right here where this little 2 1/2 is. So I come down to the bottom, and just like before, I'm going to keep it on the line. That line is going right on the tip of my fabric. This line has to be on the fabric, just like that. And so that tells me if I cut this off and this off, it is a 6 1/2 inch half square triangle. And that's what I'm trying to achieve. There we go. And then I take it out, and there's my 6 1/2. Now we have another block that we did earlier. Remember the other blue one with the butterfly? It's 6 1/2. So these should be measuring the same exact size. So when I put one over the other, it totally covers it up, which means they're both 6 1/2. Because I believe I have to attach this one to this one like that next. I think. I'll have to look here for the directions. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and cut the other one that we're going to put aside. Now, if you don't feel comfortable with this and you don't think you're quite ready to do this, I would practice. I would take some, either some old muslin or something that if you don't get your 6 1/2 correct, you could actually cut it down even further and make it another size. Because practice makes perfect when it comes to these half square triangles, but it just takes a minute to get it used to it. Now I bought this rotating table. This is an Olaf, and I bought it a long time ago. I love it when it comes to these half square triangles. Anything that I've got to have to move, I like it. If I don't have to move the fabric. I wasn't really good about cutting like up over here or on this side here. I never was good at that. And when I'm trying to be perfect and I don't want to be wasting my fabric because I don't have any more, I don't want to try that. I don't even want to chance it. So now we're going to get this 6 1/2. I'm trying to line up my lines first, and then I look at the middle and it looks good. And turn the mat. There we go. And now this one we're just going to set aside for another piece of this project. Now the directions say to take our half square triangle, and it is actually showing that, let me back you up a bit. It's showing this direction with the gray at the bottom, and then our 6 1/2 inch, which is the exact same color as this. And we're going to put these pieces together, right sides together, and I'm going to pin it. So the first thing that I'm going to do, and you can do it either way. If you do it where your seam is on the other side, you want to pin, because when your sewing machine comes along that, because you're going to be sewing it like this, you don't want that to get jammed and fold over on you. So I normally put a pin in the corner there. I'll go to the other end and put a pin. And then I'll put one about in the middle. Actually, I'm going to put 2 more in here. There we go. Now, if you feel like your fabric's just a little bit off, and when I say a little bit off, I mean that maybe when you pin it like this, maybe your top is a little bit bigger, then turn it around this direction and pin it and sew it like this. And I'm going to tell you why. I'll go ahead and flip it all over and pin it. Pin cushion here. Let's make sure I'm in the... Hard to pin with the Band-Aid on. Okay, and the reason for that is that your feed dog on your machine will feed this fabric and make it all the same size. Now we're taking this unit, which is H2, and we're attaching these two together. Keeping in mind that this light color here stays at the bottom. So I'm going to pin in the middle first. And I'm going to pin it so that I can actually see this seam facing upward at me, because I'm going to put a pin in here because I do not want either one of these to flip over. It goes down the sewing machine like that. So we'll put one at the corner here. And I'm going to put one in the middle. And that one is in the middle. It does not need 2. And then I'm going to go to the end over here, because I want to make sure that this piece stays down. And I'm going to show you here as soon as I pin it. You want to make sure that that piece, that corner there, stays down so that this doesn't roll up on you. Unless you folded yours the other direction and didn't go towards the dark, which is fine too. It's your preference. Now we're going to take it over here and we're going to sew it just like that. These are right sides together, don't forget. I needed a leader ender because I was starting on the corner there. Be careful when you come up to the part that you have opened up your seam. Same here. You want to be really careful when you get up to here. There you go, so it doesn't catch itself. Okay, it asks that you open these seams up too, so iron them the same way you did this one. Then we're going to set that aside. And now it wants us to take our 6.5 by 12.5, which is the longer one here. This one here. And it wants us to take this strip here, and we're going to put it below it. Notice this is a little bit darker. We're just going to sew these two together. I have no right or wrong. You want to make sure that they're right sides together. All right, let's see if I can get away without a leader ender. I might not be able to if I go on the edge. We're going to try it here. Okay, we got away with it this time. And by the way, I don't think I mentioned that my needle is a 12-inch needle. That's what my machine prefers. This exact machine does anyway. I have an older machine downstairs that actually takes an 11. It doesn't like the 12. Got to go with whatever your machine likes. I normally use the Schmitz brand. I believe it's called Schmitz. And if you haven't perfected your your quarter inch, you can mark your fabric a quarter inch. You can actually use a fine lead pencil. That's what I used to use at the very beginning. Because the fine lead, if you don't press down on it, you never see that in your seam. A line goes over the top of it. Now let's see what it says to open this. And it says, press your seam allowances open again. This is going to be Unit C. So let me do that. Now it is asking for the H4 to go on the right-hand corner. And then we're going to sew diagonally, cut this excess off, and flip that over like that. We're going to do the same thing on the bottom left. We're going to sew it diagonally, and then do this. So that it's going to look like that. So the first thing that you're going to want to do, in my case, because I can see how my seams are, is I went ahead and I took my, not my seams are, I'm sorry. My grain line is going up and down like this. When I sew it, it'll be going sideways, which will give it more of a texture. It'll be stronger. If I turn it this way, then it'll be going up and down. So I'm going to flip it like that. Same with this one. So I need to mark each one. And we're sewing right down the middle on that. So I take this one, and I'm going to mark it. And I'm going to use a pencil this time. And it's not going to be dash lines, it's going to be actual mark lines, because I am going to be sewing on it. Now if you're following, make sure that you're doing it on the wrong side of your fabric if you have directional fabric. So there's my line for this one. And there we go. That's that line. Now, keep in mind, we're going on this corner when we do it like that. I'm going to set this one aside, and I'm going to pin it. And I want to make sure my corners are close. So that one's a really good corner there. So I'm pinning that. And I don't want it to wiggle, but I want to make sure that it is down over here and going over that fabric right there. So I'm going to put a pin in there so that it doesn't shift, because if it shifts, it's totally off. And I don't want to sew over my line or my pin. There we go. And that looks pretty good like that. I shouldn't have to have any more pins. Let me take it over here. And this is where we're going to be careful, because we have the edge there. We don't want any of that happening. There we go. We want to go right off that corner. No locking in place. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to get the other one pinned. Here's what this one looks like. And when we flip it, it's going to go like that. So let's put this one on here. Because it'll go like that and like that. So pin this one just like you did the other one. Alrighty, I got this one pinned just like that one. I haven't cut it yet. If you feel like you've got to take your pin out, you can. I'm going to take it out here because I don't want to run over it. There we go. I'm going to show you how I'm going to cut it. What you're wanting to do is I'm taking my 1/4 inch, which is on my ruler, otherwise it's the line right here, and I'm putting it on top of the line, the stitching line itself. And then I'm cutting the excess fabric off here. And actually, now that I did that, you know what? I'm going to go do something else. I'll be right back. Here's what I forgot. Only because I haven't done it in a while. So let me go ahead and bring it down here. I went ahead and I marked the other side. Let me show it to you here. So here's the side that we already did, right here. I should have changed that out to yellow, but I didn't think about it. Anyway, so I went ahead and put a dash line between it and then came over another 1/4 inch. I'm going to sew along here. So this will make another half square triangle for something else later. Because it's easier to do it while it's attached to fabric than when it's not. I went ahead and I did this piece up here after I cut it off, and I used paper for my stabilizer. I'll show it in a minute, but let's go ahead and I'm going to finish sewing this one first. Now you cut it off. So I'm going to put it down the dashed lines, which is this right on that line, just like before. Hasn't changed any. And now it gives me another square triangle. Even though it looks like that, it doesn't make any difference because you can put that in something. And this is what the blue one looks like when it's done. And I just used paper and then tore the paper off, like paper piecing. And then we can downsize these so they end up being the same size. Because this one's bigger because of my stitch, since they weren't exactly the same. Had I done it at the same time, they would have been. So we're going to go over here and we're going to open this up and this, and it's telling you to press your, let's see, where does it say? Press your seam allowance away from Unit C. Unit C is this one here. Let's turn it this way. This is Unit C. So they want the seam allowance away from it. So that means the seam allowance is going to come towards B, or B, H, which is the blue, or G, which is probably your gold color. So let me go up there and iron that. Like this one is all ironed. Oh my goodness. And then we're going to be attaching our other unit, which is this one here. This is the B at the top. And we're putting this like this. Just like that. Let me pull away a little bit here so you can see it. I'm going to attach it like that. And you're going to take your pins and you're going to pin it here in the middle because this is where you want it to meet like that. See how it's going to meet up? This is going to be on the top of that, like that. So they go right across like that. Here's where you're going to start in the middle. Let me clip some of this away because all these threads. Goodness gracious. Okay, we're looking at the seam here because we want this seam to match up. So we're trying to get the right hand side on the blue fabric and the left hand side on the cream colored fabric. We'll put our pin in. I'll try to put my pin in. There we go. The blue is over here and the cream's over there. And then we're going to go out to the end and pin it on the left and the right. Just like that, all the way to the end. Now in the pinning process of this, I'm trying not to trip over my cords. My phone started dying on me here. I pinned it on each end here, pulled it taut like that, held it down, and then pinned it. That's all I'm doing. Just like that. So I got a lot of pins in it. Put one here. Now let's see if it works. Oh, let me tell you. So I started out with a scant 1/4 inch, but when I went and tried to pin it together, it would not work based on the pieces that got added on this side. So I took it back out and I went a 1/4 inch based on my machine, which kind of doesn't look like a 1/4 inch. I just go by the mark that's on my machine. Now, I took out this seam and this seam only, the long seam between the two blue. This seam and this seam here I redid based on this fabric here when it got sewn together, because I made it because it was off. And so the first thing I did was I measured the fabric to make sure I had it right. Well, I did have it right. So I figured it had to do with the seam. So what I did was I took away seam by making the seam bigger. So if that's what you got to do, then do it. And hopefully you're following the whole thing before you actually start on the project, if you're following me. That's what I do when I watch a video. I wait and watch the whole thing before I actually do it. Because, I don't know about most people, they won't even show their mistakes. I just told you what mine was. And I have already shown mistakes before in other videos that I've done, so that you know how to fix them. Oops, I didn't even get that. Hard to grab that with my thumb. And you got to know where your 1/4 inch seam is actually on your machine, because every machine is different. Every one of my machines, the 1/4 inch is a different place. And I have had no success with the 1/4 inch foot. So I just go by the marks on this little plate here. And then I'm holding it a little tight as I go, not giving it slack, and letting it feed itself. Let's take a look at it. Now I'm just going to go ahead and iron it. And then I'll put this up on the design wall. Before I put the finished square on the design wall, I want to go ahead and tell you the story. Let me give you a little bit of a back on the story. So Kitty, the anthropologist, who is our heroine again in the story. Alright, so because of her upbringing, she was homeschooled, and she got into picking locks. Well, at one of her jobs in Georgia, I believe, she picked a lock and got in trouble, hot trouble. The individual that got her fired, which of course you know if this happens to you, you're never going to forget it, she would figure she'd never have anything to do with this guy again. Well, in her job now, she's working at the Dutch National Museum of Antiquities. I cannot say the name of the museum, so I'm not even going to try because I'll just damage it. Anyway, so Dr. Dubois, I believe is how you pronounce his name, would never have any kind of interaction with him again. Well, while she's at her job, she has a new assistant, and her assistant, just from the gist that I get of the story, she's going to be the girl that's going to do the social media part to get them recognized, the importance of it, so they get funding and that kind of thing. Because this is all new for museums, I guess, at this time, where this is located over in Egypt. Well, anyway, so her name is Mary. I'm going to call her Mary Jane. It's easier than pronouncing her name because I never can pronounce any of these people's names. Well, anyway, so while she's doing like a, it's a YouTube video for the Facebook, and she's being asked questions by Mary Jane, she gets a phone call that she recognizes a number, thought she'd never see the number again, goes ahead, picks it up, and she wasn't quite sure what to expect. Come to find out, he wants her assistance. So she finds that kind of odd. Of all the people to call, why would he be calling her? On the telephone, she could hear his desperation. he called her first name, and she said, no, that's Dr. Campbell to you. So you kind of know she still is a bit aggravated by what happened, which would be normal. And he says, well, I need your help. And she goes, well, wait, where are you? And he said, here. And she goes, well, where is here? Because she didn't know where he's at. She figures he's on the other side of the world. And he said, Cairo. That's exactly where she's at in Europe. Well, the coincidence is hard to take. And she says, well, do you need me to look at some samples for you? Because, you know, that's what she did in the last video. She checks out samples. That's what her job is. And he said, there was like a big old long pause. And, of course, you know, her curiosity is just getting the better of her. And he said, no, I need you to get a body out of a van. Now, this is the very thing that got her into trouble the first time around when she picked a lock. And that's what he's asking her to do. So that is the entire chapter this month. The stuff that I told you about, short of her little bit of background, that was like a page and a half of her conversation on the telephone with him. All the rest of it was her coming to Cairo, her having her new sidekick, Marianne, that's helping her, and the social media stuff, getting it out there for them. So let me go ahead and put up the selfie block, that's what it's called, on the design wall so you guys can take a look at it. There it is. I'm going to guess the top part is probably representing the sky, where the bottom would be the sand. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give me a thumbs up if you did. If you haven't subscribed, you can. Go ahead. It doesn't cost you anything. Click on the little bell. You'll get the notifications for the next one. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks for watching.